Hello everyone, it's Varigata, and on this week's New for 2022 we have a gaudy pixelated pulp adventure taking you far across the galaxy. Lunark is a 2D cinematic platformer released by Canari Games, an independent Canadian studio founded in 2018. Lunark is a single-player platformer which takes inspiration from classic 80s and 90s offerings. Today I am playing the demo, which shows us the inner workings of a robot assembly line, presents character interactions and rotoscoped cutscenes, as well as flying us to a mysterious cave system to run, jump and fight through a la everyone's favourite adventurous archaeologists. We are introduced to Leo, an orphan with some interesting characteristics and unique abilities, who will eventually fulfill his destiny. As long as he survives war and conflict under a totalitarian regime, that is. I played the Steam PC demo, which involves lots of keyboard control and honing the fast movements necessary to avoid plunging to your untimely deaths when leaping across chasms. An Xbox version appears to be in the works, at least according to the options menu where Xbox controls are listed, as well as reference to a D-pad and some conversation text. The tutorial is actually quite inventive, asking you to control a robot reenacting all the moves you will eventually, hopefully, successfully pull off, just like playing a video game. It makes a change from asking you to test the interactions yourself, although I didn't end up forgetting some of the keyboard commands a bit later in the demo when we actually reached the aforementioned caves, which might not have happened had I instead been fed the commands upon arrival. This is a bit of a minor issue though, and it might well just be a me being dim-witted problem anyway, and basically everything else ran smoothly. Let's tell you a little bit about the story itself. Obviously, a lot is still under wraps in order to maintain a sense of mystery about exactly who is in charge here, but this is a basic rundown. It starts in presumably the near-ish future, when all the scaremongering turns out to be true and our unsustainable way of life has led to our downfall. Apparently, we only had a decade left, so some extremely fast-moving scientists built an artificial intelligence, advanced enough that it could absolutely, definitely solve all of our problems, and presumably not backfire in any way. This AI powered a supercomputer, which came up with a completely straightforward and simple solution. Transform the whole moon into a giant spaceship using the core as a reactor, which I don't even know if that could that work? I don't know. To propel the moon on a journey across space and time to reach the next nearest habitable planet. This is a journey of epic proportions, transporting embryos through the vastness of the interstellar medium until finally they reach a safe haven. Now, side note, very impressed with these scientists who apparently managed to build an AI supercomputer and moon-powered spaceship in maybe a decade. That sounds a little bit like when you have a project at work with a month's deadline and then you all faff about in planning meetings and then you end up having to do the actual work the day before and somehow it all comes together. Anyway, very good. Now, maybe you are wondering, yes, that's lovely, Varigata, but where does it all go wrong? At what point does this utopian AI-powered moon go a bit tits up? Well, you'll be pleased to know that we lasted a solid 300 years, which I think is pretty good going, actually. During that time, the AI takes control and rules over us with a droid army, because, of course it does. And the moon is just sadly hanging in orbit around our newish, safe planet, reminding everyone of what we lost. Marvellous. just what I've always envisaged our future to be. Very technological, but ultimately a bit sad. I, for one, thinks this sounds like a great setup for a platformer, and whilst this demo only presented a very small portion of our plot, it does grab my attention, and I'm very much interested in seeing how this finishes. The plot itself reminds me of The Wandering Earth, a short story by Cixin Liu, although in his tale it's the Earth itself which is used as our spaceship through the stars in a desperate attempt to find safe passage. AI and ML are obviously becoming more and more important to our everyday lives, so it'll be interesting, it's always interesting to see how different authors, writers, artists, etc. handle our possible futures, and it'll be particularly fun to see how this indie game handles our potential development. As I said, Lunark has been created and developed by Canari Games, an independent Canadian studio founded by Johan Vinay. Previously, Johan Vinay has worked on other indie games including Flint Hook, Mercenary Kings Reloaded, Shovel Knight Showdown and Rivals of Aether, so he should have plenty of form when it comes to creating original indie content. So, let's talk about my feelings after the demo, anything I liked or disliked, and my hopes for the full game. First of all, the music and the soundtrack were great. They were very enjoyable. They fitted with the cutscenes perfectly, and whilst occasionally repetitive, the soundtrack did not become irritating, although I do hope that there is a wider range of accompaniment for the full game. I think my favourite aspect is the colour scheme. The bright, the clashing, the gaudy, the retro colours that are used throughout. There's no dark, rainy sci-fi dystopias here, although we might get to look forward to that later. I found it very easy on the eye, and it caught my attention, and it held it for a long time. I liked the chatty characters, and there already seems to be a nice range of people to speak to. Another favourite aspect for me was the cinematic, rotoscoped, animated cutscenes. They break up the animation at an appropriate pace, and also, they just look cool, which I think is the most important thing, really, isn't it? The puzzles were fine, but I'm a horrible combination of both slow and dim, so it wasn't always obvious to me which direction I had to head in next, and it took me ages to get to each relevant item. I do love a bit of pixel art, as much as the next gal, but sometimes the images were so pixelated that it was a bit difficult to see what I was looking at, and I needed the descriptions that went along with it to know the object that I was picking up. The movement and the viewpoint was okay, but I did sometimes find that the view itself was not, the point of view was not always that great, and I accidentally died a couple of times because it was not always obvious where the big massive chasm drops are. Maybe it's just part of the fun, I don't know, but plummeting to my death became vaguely irritating after the first couple of times. He does have a good death animation though, they don't really scrimp on the blood. As for the full game, I would very much love to keep the full colour range that's currently in bloom in this demo, as well as the soundtrack and the sound effects. The story background given on the website and on Steam sounds brilliant, so I'd really love to see how this is fully developed. I would enjoy more points of view, if possible, or some sort of zoom in, zoom out function, perhaps. I'm also excited to discover new ways to fight, and I'd be interested to see if we are to be given any further weapons in the full game. So that is Lunark, a retro neon 2D cinematic adventure platformer with a bit of archaeology thrown in and some dystopian totalitarian AI regimes as a little cherry on top. What do you think? Will you be playing this game? Comment down below if you know of anything similar, and follow me on Twitter to stay up to date with my next video releases. Full information about Lunark is available in the description below. See you next time. Bye!